The mountain range stretched wide and silent under a pale morning sky. Snow still covered much of the land, even though the season had begun to change. Tall trees stood like guards on both sides of the narrow trail, their branches heavy and still. Sam moved forward with slow and careful steps. He had walked these mountains for years, yet today felt strange in a way he could not explain. Sam was a ranger whose job was to protect the land and everything living on it. He knew the usual sounds of the forest and the normal signs left behind by animals or weather. That morning, however, his mind stayed alert. A sensor placed deep in the mountains had sent a warning signal late the night before. It was unusual because that sensor almost never failed. Sam had been asked to check it alone, as the weather and terrain made it difficult for a full team to come along. As he moved higher, the path became harder to see. Snow covered old tracks, and fallen branches blocked parts of the trail. Sam checked his map again. According to all official records, this area was empty. No shelters, no cabins, and no long-term camps were allowed or known to exist here. That knowledge stayed in his thoughts as he walked. After nearly an hour, Sam noticed something that made him stop. A straight edge stood out among the wild shapes of the forest. Trees did not grow in straight lines like that. His eyes followed the shape, and his breath slowed. Between the trees sat a wooden cabin. The cabin looked old but cared for. The roof was firm, and the walls were strong. Snow rested gently on top, and moss clung to the lower edges. It was not falling apart like abandoned buildings usually were. It stood quietly, as if it belonged there, even though it did not. Sam felt his chest tighten. This cabin was not on any map. No one had permission to build here. The thought made his hands tense as he walked closer. He noticed footprints around the cabin. Many footprints. Some were small, others uneven, as if made by tired people. These were not old marks. They were fresh. He reached for his radio and tried to call the station. The signal cracked and faded into silence. The mountains blocked communication often, so this did not surprise him, but it did mean he was alone. Sam stood near the door and listened. The forest around him was quiet, yet from inside the cabin, there was a soft sound. It was not wind. It was breathing. He knocked once, then waited. No answer came. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Slowly, Sam opened the door. Warm air flowed out, surprising him. Inside, a small stove burned steadily. The room was clean. Blankets covered the floor in neat layers. Cans of food were stacked carefully, not randomly. Water containers lined one wall. Someone had planned this place. Someone had lived here for a long time. Then Sam saw the people. They sat close together near the back of the room. Their clothes were worn but clean. Their faces were thin, their eyes watchful. Among them were children, holding each other tightly. No one moved at first. No one spoke. Sam lifted his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. His voice came out calm but careful. He asked who they were and if they needed help. Before anyone answered, a boy stood up. He looked no older than 12. In his hands, he held a thick notebook, worn at the edges. The boy looked at Sam with a steady gaze and spoke softly. He said they had been waiting. That single sentence filled the room with tension. Sam felt his heart beat faster. Waiting for what? Or for who? The boy stepped closer and held out the notebook. Sam hesitated, then took it gently. The pages were filled with writing. Dates, notes, names, and drawings covered every page. It was not random writing. It was careful, organized, like a record. Sam looked around again and noticed the walls. Symbols and maps were drawn neatly. Lines connected places across the mountains and beyond. Some dates went back many years. Too many years. A woman finally spoke. Her voice was low but steady. She said they could not leave. She said the world outside had forgotten them. They had come here long ago because they believed it was the only safe place left. Sam tried to understand. He asked why no one knew about them. Another man answered quietly. He said they had tried to be found before, but every time they reached out, something stopped it. Signals failed. Messages never arrived. Over time, they learned to survive alone. The children listened closely, as if they had heard this story many times. This was their life. The cabin. The mountains. The waiting. Sam felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. These people were not hiding from the law. They were hiding from being lost again. He realized that whatever this situation was, it was bigger than a simple report. As Sam prepared to leave to get help, the boy spoke again. He pointed to a page in the notebook. It showed a date marked for that very day. Next to it were words written carefully. It said someone would finally come. Sam looked at the boy, then at the others. He understood then that finding this cabin was not an accident. These people believed this moment was meant to happen. Sam stepped outside, the cold air hitting his face. He looked back at the cabin once more before closing the door. The mountains stood silent as before, but nothing felt the same anymore. What he had found would change everything. And the world was about to learn what had been hidden for so long. Sam did not leave the cabin right away. The cold outside could wait. What mattered now were the people sitting quietly behind him, watching every move he made. He placed the notebook carefully on the table near the stove and looked at each face again. They were not strangers anymore. They were people who had been unseen for a long time. He asked their names, and they answered one by one. Simple names. Quiet voices. Nothing unusual, yet everything felt heavy. The woman who had spoken earlier said her name was Mira. The man beside her was called Luke. Others followed. Each name added weight to the moment. These were not stories written in a book. They were lives. Sam asked how long they had lived in the mountains. Mira said it had been more than 10 years. She said it slowly, as if saying the number too fast would make it sound unreal. Sam tried to imagine 10 winters in this place. 10 years of snow, silence, and waiting. Luke explained that they had once lived normal lives. Different towns. Different paths. Something had brought them together years ago. A promise of safety. A promise of a place away from fear and confusion. They were told the mountains would protect them. At first, it had felt true. Sam listened without interrupting. He noticed how the children leaned closer when the adults spoke. They had grown up hearing these words. This was their history. Mira said they tried to return once. They packed what little they had and followed the old trail down the mountain. But halfway through, heavy snow blocked the path. Their equipment failed. One of them became ill. They turned back, believing it was not yet time. After that, they stopped trying. Days turned into months. Months into years. The cabin became their world. Sam asked about the maps and symbols on the wall. Luke walked over and pointed to them. Each line marked a place they had once planned to reach. Each symbol stood for an attempt to contact the outside world. Radios, signals, fires, all failed. Sam's mind worked fast. He knew the mountains could interfere with signals, but not always. Something else had kept these people hidden. Whether it was bad luck or something more, he could not yet say. The boy who had first spoken stepped forward again. His name was Noah. He said the notebook was his job. From the time he could write, he had been asked to record everything. Weather changes. Supplies. Dreams. Hope. He said writing made the waiting easier. Sam opened the notebook again and flipped through the pages. There were notes about birthdays celebrated quietly. Drawings of the cabin during different seasons. Lines written again and again about seeing lights far away at night. About wondering if anyone remembered them. One page caught Sam's attention. It spoke of a rule they all followed. If someone ever came, they were not to run. Not to hide. They were to wait and tell the truth. Sam felt something tighten in his chest. These people had prepared for this moment for years. He finally told them who he was and why he had come. He explained the sensor and his job as a ranger. Mira looked at Luke, then back at Sam. She said maybe that was how it was meant to happen. Not through a message, but through a mistake. Sam told them he needed to report this. He said help would come. Medical teams. Supplies. Answers. Some of the children smiled. Others looked afraid. Luke asked a simple question. What if the world did not believe them? Sam had no answer ready. He could only promise to try. Before leaving, Sam took photos of the cabin, the maps, and the notebook pages. He made careful notes. He wanted everything documented properly. When he stepped outside, the cold air hit him hard. The mountains felt heavier now, as if they were watching. He walked until he found a place where his radio signal returned. He reported everything. A hidden cabin. Multiple people. Children. Long-term living. The voice on the other end went silent for a moment. Then came orders to stay where he was. Within hours, the quiet mountains changed. Helicopters circled above. Teams arrived carefully, respecting the land. Sam led them back to the cabin. The people inside did not panic. They stood together, holding hands. Mira met Sam's eyes and nodded. This was the moment they had written about. News spread faster than anyone expected. A hidden group living unseen in the mountains for years. A cabin that should not exist. A notebook that told a story of waiting. Cameras arrived. Questions followed. Sam stayed close. He watched as doctors checked the group and workers brought supplies. The children stared at the helicopters with wide eyes. The adults spoke calmly, as if afraid sudden movement would break the moment. That night, as the mountains returned to silence, Sam sat alone near the cabin. He realized the shock was not just the discovery of the people. It was the truth behind it. A reminder of how easily lives could disappear from sight. What he had found was no longer just a ranger report. It was a story that would touch the entire nation. And the hardest questions were still ahead. The story of the hidden cabin spread quickly beyond the mountains. What began as a quiet discovery soon became a topic discussed everywhere. News reports spoke of a group of people who had lived unseen for years, protected by snow, silence, and belief. Images of the cabin appeared on screens across the country. The notebook became a symbol of patience and survival. Sam stayed nearby as the situation grew larger. He watched teams work carefully, asking questions and listening to every answer. The people from the cabin were moved to a temporary shelter near the mountain base. It was warm, bright, and full of unfamiliar sounds. For the children, the lights alone felt overwhelming. Mira struggled with the noise. She had lived with wind and fire for so long that voices now felt sharp. Luke tried to remain calm for everyone, reminding them that this was what they had waited for. Still, his hands often trembled when he thought no one was watching. Sam visited often. He felt responsible, not just because he had found them, but because he had listened. The notebook stayed with the group, though copies were made for records. Noah continued to write, adding new pages. This time, his words spoke of questions instead of waiting. Public reaction came in waves. Some people felt moved and proud that the group had survived. Others questioned how it could have happened without anyone noticing. Officials began reviewing old reports and forgotten records. Slowly, pieces of the past started to appear. It turned out that years ago, there had been plans to create a small research zone in the mountains. The plan was later cancelled, but temporary shelters were built and never properly removed from records. The cabin had started as one of those shelters. Over time, it had been repaired and changed. Paperwork mistakes and failed systems allowed it to vanish from official memory. The people from the cabin had been part of a small group connected by those early plans. When the project ended suddenly, they were left without clear direction. Confusion followed. Supplies ran low. Communication broke down. Fear of the unknown world pushed them to stay. As these details came to light, the public reaction shifted. The story was no longer about mystery alone. It became about responsibility. About how systems could forget real people. Mira spoke during a recorded interview. Her voice was steady, though her eyes carried years of silence. She said they never meant to disappear. They simply followed the path they believed was safest. Over time, that path became their only choice. Luke talked about the children. He said they deserved more than a life hidden in the mountains. He said hope kept them going, but hope alone was not enough. His words reached many who listened. Sam watched these moments from a distance. He never sought attention. He believed his role had been simple. Walk the trail. Follow the signal. Yet his actions had opened a door that could not be closed again. Noah became a quiet focus of attention. People were touched by his writing. His notebook pages were shared carefully, with respect. One drawing showed the cabin surrounded by question marks. Another showed a wide open road with no end in sight. As days passed, plans were made. The group would not be rushed. Support systems were arranged. Education, housing, and guidance would come step by step. Officials promised not to treat them like a problem to solve, but like people to understand. Still, change was hard. At night, some of the children had trouble sleeping. Silence felt strange now. Mira missed the sound of snow against wood. Luke found it hard to trust open spaces. Sam walked the mountain trails alone one evening. He looked back toward where the cabin stood. The place felt empty now, yet alive with memory. He realized the shock that gripped the nation was not about the cabin itself. It was about being reminded how close unseen lives could be. A meeting was held weeks later. Sam was invited, though he did not speak much. Mira and Luke stood before a small group of officials and helpers. They did not ask for special treatment. They asked for care, for patience, for time. The nation continued to watch, but more quietly now. The story had moved from surprise to reflection. People asked themselves how many other stories remained hidden, waiting for someone to listen. Noah wrote one final line in his notebook that night. He wrote that the waiting was over, but the learning had just begun. And Sam, standing under the same wide sky, knew that finding the cabin had changed more than one life. It had changed how people looked at silence. Time moved forward in ways that felt slow and fast at the same moment. The people from the cabin began their new lives step by step. Nothing was rushed. Everyone understood that years of silence could not be undone in a single day. Each morning brought small changes, and each night brought quiet reflection. The temporary shelter near the mountains slowly became a place of learning. The children attended classes designed to help them adjust. They learned about the world beyond the trees and snow they had always known. At first, they spoke little, listening more than talking. Over time, their curiosity grew. Simple questions turned into long conversations. Mira found comfort in routine. She helped prepare meals and organized shared spaces, the same way she had done in the cabin. These small tasks grounded her. They reminded her that care and order could exist anywhere. Sometimes she looked toward the mountains in the distance, not with sadness, but with respect. That place had kept them alive. Luke focused on the future. He worked with counselors and planners, learning how to guide the group through what came next. He spoke openly about mistakes made in the past, not to place blame, but to make sure they were never repeated. His voice carried a quiet strength shaped by years of responsibility. Sam returned to his regular duties as a ranger, but nothing felt routine anymore. Every trail reminded him of how close unseen lives could be. He checked sensors more carefully. He listened longer. The mountains felt less empty now, filled with stories instead of silence. The nation slowly shifted its attention, but the impact remained. Policies were reviewed. Systems were improved. Records were checked again and again. The story of the cabin became a lesson taught in meetings and classrooms. It was no longer about shock. It was about awareness. Noah continued writing. His notebook gained new pages filled with first experiences. A bus ride. A classroom. A window that looked out over a town instead of trees. His words were hopeful but honest. He wrote about confusion and excitement living side by side. One afternoon, Noah asked Sam to walk with him. They followed a path near the shelter, not steep, not dangerous. Noah said he wanted to see the mountains one last time before winter ended. Sam agreed. They stood quietly, looking at the distant peaks. Noah asked if the cabin was still there. Sam said it was. It would remain protected, not as a home, but as a reminder. Noah nodded, satisfied. Weeks turned into months. The group moved into permanent housing nearby, close enough to the mountains to feel familiar, but open enough to grow. Each person chose their own pace. Some stepped forward quickly. Others took time. All were respected. Mira planted a small garden outside her new home. She said watching things grow helped her feel balanced. Luke began working with organizations that focused on community safety and awareness. He believed their story could help others avoid being forgotten. Sam was invited to speak once, but he declined. He believed the story belonged to those who lived it. His role was to keep walking the trails, to keep listening. On a quiet evening, Sam returned alone to the place where the cabin stood. Snow had melted, revealing earth and roots beneath. The cabin looked the same, but empty. Sunlight filtered through the trees, warming the wooden walls. Sam stepped inside briefly. Dust rested where blankets once lay. The stove was cold. Silence filled the space, but it felt peaceful, not heavy. The waiting had ended here. As he left, Sam closed the door gently. He placed a small marker nearby, simple and clear, so the place would never be lost again. Far below, life continued. The children laughed more easily now. Mira smiled more often. Luke slept better at night. Noah wrote about dreams that reached beyond the mountains. The nation moved on, but it remembered. The story stayed alive in quiet ways, in careful systems and kinder attention. And high in the mountains, where silence once hid lives, the land stood open, holding nothing back. The shock had faded, but the lesson remained. Sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one person willing to follow a signal and open a door.